I am Martez Reed, Director of Technical Marketing with Morpheus Data. This session, we're going to walk through the platform architecture of the Morpheus platform itself. So I want to touch on a couple of things really quick in terms of the Morpheus platform. A couple of use cases in particular that we see time and time again that the platform is leveraged for. Infrastructure provisioning, certainly that does not exclude application deployment, but from a platform standpoint, we do see the need to orchestrate the end-to-end provisioning of the infrastructure. That's the challenge we see time and time again with the large enterprise organizations that we go into, is that it's typically a process that involves a ticket. For somebody to get a new web server, a new database server, goes through a half dozen different teams, takes a dozen plus steps. Usually that process takes a couple of days, couple of weeks, couple of months. Morpheus looks to bring that down to a number of minutes by integrating with the various solutions such as on-prem hypervisors, public clouds, IP address management, DNS, CMDB, automation tools like Chef, Ansible, Puppet to orchestrate that end-to-end process and then be able to expose that via the self-service catalog, the REST API or CLI to really simplify the process that it takes to turn around that particular workload in a consistent, secure, and repeatable fashion. Additionally, the platform that David also walked through was the ability to be able to tie into on-prem hypervisors as well as public clouds. He did also mention in the previous session was tying into infrastructure as code. So that is another use case of the platform, so being able to front end infrastructure as code, leveraging the platform's self-service catalog to simplify the consumption of infrastructure as code across the broader organization. Challenge we typically see with that is there's centers of excellence that are really good and really capable at building out Terraform and cloud formation. The challenge becomes when you look to scale that across the organization to teams that aren't specialized in developing IAC and working with automation. Maybe it's data engineering, maybe it's other groups within the organization that simply need to consume that Terraform. How do we provide a means for them to quickly get what it is that they need without having to deal with all the nuance from a technical perspective? Cluster management platform does support the ability to be able to provision and manage Kubernetes clusters. On-prem, we have the ability to be able to deploy our MKS Kubernetes cluster in public cloud, AKS, EKS, GKE, ability to support those. Platform also supports runbook automation. This is near and dear to my heart as a former automation engineer. Challenge we see time and time again is somebody's written a script, written some automation. How do I scale that across the organization? It's typically where it starts to fall down in that I've written the script. Now, how do I hand it off effectively to somebody else? They're going to need to know more often than not credentials. They're going to need to know where the script is. They're going to need to know potential dependencies for that particular piece of automation, if it's a Python script or some other form of automation. Platform supports the ability to be able to expose that in a scheduled fashion. So various operational jobs within the IT organization need to run on a nightly or a weekly or a monthly basis. Being able to do that through a centralized platform that supports various different automation types like Ansible, Python, PowerShell, Bash. Also supports the ability to integrate with Git to reference those scripts and those automations. And then also supports the ability to be able to expose those via that same self-service catalog that we can leverage for infrastructure provisioning to really simplify the ability to be able to consume that automation. And then the last two, very much related to one another, cloud visibility and cloud optimization. The platform supports the ability to be able to tie into the various on-prem environments, as well as the public clouds, to discover existing and brownfield workloads, in addition to the ability to be able to provision into those via net new workloads, and then also includes things like guidance recommendations and further optimizations for those workloads after the fact.
So I would presume that would give you the capability to, for example, in the public cloud environment, right, to be able to monitor things like, hey, this VM, this compute instance, whatever, has been sitting here idle for innumerable hours, days, whatever. You know, somebody may have left the company, started it up for a development operation a month ago, and it's sitting there crunching up cycles, storage, whatever.
Yeah.
So that would be the ability to go ahead and go issue a recommendation. Shut this dude down. We don't need it anymore.
Yeah,
that kind of thing?
absolutely have the ability to be able to see that after the fact. Additionally, we also have that capability from a governance standpoint, leveraging the platform with various policies. So things like expiration policies to
Right.
reduce VM sprawl, as well as the ability to be able to leverage things like power scheduling within the Morpheus platform to be able to start and stop the workloads
Okay.
based upon actual business hours and utilization of that particular workload. So a number of mechanisms for brownfield workloads, as well as for workloads provisioned through the Morpheus platform itself to help with governance.
And I presume you could do things like maybe even schedule particular VMs to start and stop at a particular time, because not most of the clouds do offer that, but
yeah, absolutely. It's a native policy, and the benefit of that becomes being able to do that across the various different clouds in a consistent fashion.
Right. And I presume that's through APIs and CLIs or whatever you need.
Available through the API, CLI, as well as
Awesome.
the UI.
Awesome. Okay, thanks.
All right, so Morpheus platform has been around for some time now. Over the last 18 to 24 months, there's been a number of market dynamics that have greatly impacted Morpheus as well as the broader industry. So things like the Broadcom acquisition of VMware, what that's causing is customers to look at options. Doesn't mean they're going to move off of VMware right this instance or anytime in the future, but they're at the point of where they're looking for alternatives, whether that be Nutanix, OpenStack, insert any other solution that might be thrown into the ring. So they're looking for options. Additionally, workload repatriation, whether we think it's real or not, people are seriously looking at whether it makes sense to move workloads out of the public cloud into on-prem or hosted colo environments in which they can get essentially the best bang for their buck. We're also seeing more and more sovereign clouds starting to become critically important, particularly outside of North America, in which organizations would love for their data to stay within their country, within their boundaries, from a data sovereignty standpoint, as well as just an overall control standpoint when we start to look at the overall geopolitical landscape. And then finally, AI and ML workloads. It's a continually emerging use case, and in many ways, it's creating a challenge of how we think about where workloads are deployed, how they're deployed, particularly when you look at things like data gravity that comes with AI and ML workloads, as well as the need for the compute to run closer to those workloads.
So does something like Morpheus support workload migration?
Morpheus is not a migration tool. What the platform does offer is a framework that offers the ability to be able to quickly spin up workloads in various different cloud environments. So as an example, if I were to leverage the platform in an automated fashion to stand up an Apache server, I could leverage the hooks to a given hypervisor that are very comparable across VMware and in AWS to spin up the instance in those clouds, and then leverage something like an Ansible playbook to facilitate the installation of Apache, regardless of whether it's in an on-prem environment or in a public cloud environment. The challenge that often people run into when they want to move workloads essentially on a whim of it's cheaper in AWS today than it was in Azure. Usually, it's going to be contingent on the application. Was the application written in such a fashion to take advantage of cloud native services in which my application is going to talk directly to an AWS service? I could try to move that to Azure, but the moment I move it to Azure, it's going to break because the application is not written as such. So Morpheus can help provide the framework to facilitate these things, but it all is going to come down to how is the application running in that particular environment, and does it support the ability to be able to essentially be deployed in either environment?
It sounds like what you're trying to do, though, is enable the application managers or developers, right? So all that work you just described could be prelude to migration or to, I guess, I don't know, refactoring or rebuilding.
Replatforming is kind of how I would consider it versus migration.
Yeah,
Using
but it
us
doesn't
in concert with like a Zerto or a data mover is, like we'll handle the application business logic, from A to B, and then someone's got to actually move the move the data is usually where migration, I think, often becomes a tricky challenge that we haven't tackled.
I just feel more like you may be in the cloud, in one cloud a lot of times, doing a whole lot of stuff. That's your easy button historical easy button for enabling developers to just go spin up stuff and do things. What you're talking about is an easier way to replicate that on-prem, for example, in this repatriation example, and then add that as an option too, so that they can do it in the old, it's not really the old way, but the previous method, and they can do it in the new method. And you can just keep going to give them choice and then impose policies so that, you know, you start to repatriate more naturally. But it's not really, we're talking about migrating a life cycle process.
Yeah, consistency of operation.
Yeah,
is
with
what it
consistent
really
operation.
affords.
And yeah,
I
okay.
think hybrid cloud's kind of an inevitability, not a strategy, right? Like it just kind of happens. And a lot of the homegrown kind of provisioning engines, like you can write a Rube Goldberg-esque thing to, you know, automate provisioning. But to your point, if another team comes up, wants to use a different cloud or a different modality, that's where those things kind of break. So we want to be that framework that lets them, you know, oh, I want to do some AI ML in Google. Great. I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm just.
That's a really cool use case, honestly, or scenario, in my opinion, because the idea of the migration strikes fear and worry and cost and all kinds of things, and as well it should.
Yeah, and that's really the major value is organizations now more than ever
I
are
gave you
looking
that.
for. I appreciate
Gave
that.
that segue.
Are looking for diversity in terms of where they're hosting their workloads. In the past, so if you look 15, 20 years ago, for many it was we're a VMware shop. Then it became we're a VMware shop plus a little AWS. And then we're a lot of AWS and still it's a lot of VMware. Then it became multi-cloud. Well, we're VMware plus AWS plus Azure plus maybe a little GCP. And now organizations are going to have to rationalize, well, we're a VMware shop plus AWS plus Azure plus GCP and maybe a little OpenStack and maybe a little Nutanix. So now you're in this world where you're looking for a platform to help provide some sanity and rationalization across all of these different platforms in which my workloads may end up needing to run.
So it's pretty clear to me that this works straightforwardly for the deploy side of things. But when I get that optimization report that says we're inefficient with this pile of workloads running in whichever one of these spheres it's running, can you walk through a scenario how I actually use that report then to affect the change for the optimization? Because it sounds like so far I'm hearing like you can get the report, but God help you actually doing something about it.
Yeah, so one of the things that was touched on the previous session is the guidance section within the Morpheus platform is actionable insight. It's going to provide you information of, hey, you requested 84 gigabytes of memory. That's way too much. It should really be 16. We also have the ability to act on that, given our hooks into the hypervisors as well as the public clouds, to be able to say, you know what? Execute an operation to drop that down to 16. Because we can talk to the hypervisor to resize that workload or talk to the public cloud to resize that workload.
Okay, so you can optimize within the bucket it's already on. What you're struggling with here is the optimization would be move it from here to here. That's where we're tripping.
So we're not a migration tool. We're not going to move workloads. That's not what we do.
So that won't even be in my optimization
No,
report.
there'll
This
be
much better.
no migrator move. If you're looking for migrator move,
We will.
Okay.
it's another tool best suited for that. So one of the things we looked at was the fact that things are changing. And in particular, we're starting to see more and more diversity, also in terms of location of where workloads are deployed. One of the things that we've worked on over the last 6 to 12 months is the ability to be able to leverage a more distributed architecture. One of the things mentioned in the previous session was the distributed worker that the platform has within its capability. This provides a functionality to be able to build out a control plane. Many are looking now at a cloud control plane. Morpheus can be deployed into, let's say, as an example, a public cloud account, and then leverage the platform's ability to be able to reach into various different environments, particularly from an on-prem data center standpoint or a co-location, leveraging the distributed worker without the need for a direct connect or a VPN, the distributed worker provides the ability, similar to ServiceNow's mid server, in which it would allow the Morpheus platform to connect into those given environments. One of the things that was mentioned was a large portion of our customer base is service providers, as well as we do have a number of OEMs that we work with that are able to take advantage of this model in which they have a hosted Morpheus, but leveraging the distributed worker, they're able to tie into customer data centers to be able to manage and provision workloads in there. What's a presentation without a little AI and ML? Everybody wants it. Morpheus is not an AI platform, not an ML platform, but we do have a number of different parts that are extremely valuable when you think about somebody wanting to deploy a workload that does leverage AI ML capabilities. So when we look at the platform's ability to be able to tie into Kubernetes, virtual machines, hypervisors on-prem, as well as in the public cloud, and then additionally, bare metal. Platform does have an integration with Canonical Mass to be able to provision bare metal instances on demand. So when you start to couple those components, in addition to the platform's ability to be able to orchestrate the full provisioning process that includes automation via things like Ansible, Chef, Puppet, PowerShell, Bash, you can pull those pieces together, expose that via a self-service catalog where a data scientist can come into the platform and say, I need one of these, one of those, quickly get what it is that they need. Additionally, the platform includes a plugin framework that will allow additional extensibility to be able to tap into things like, let's say, monitoring for GPUs that a given user can see within the platform, native to the platform. So to further build out that example, in this case, Lauren, she wants a PyTorch instance. She wants to do some testing, some evaluation. Morpheus platform is going to talk to IPAM, talk to DNS. It's going to talk to the hypervisor, spin up an Ubuntu instance. It's going to talk to Ansible, orchestrate the installation of various agents, various libraries from a GPU standpoint, as well as the installation of PyTorch. And then finally, it's going to populate the CMDB with the appropriate and requisite information. And then as part of Morpheus' strategy to continue to provide a platform that can address the diversification of hosting platforms, platform does include a plugin architecture that provides the ability to be able to extend it beyond what's included out of the box to tap into things like IPAM, DNS, CMDB, task and automation types that the platform doesn't natively support. That allows us to be able to work with various third-party providers and other organizations to be able to provide that functionality. Additionally, as part of our efforts to ensure that that's successful, there is a developer portal, which makes it easy to get started and provides a centralized location for information and documentation about plugins. Plugin scaffolding is essentially a quick start where somebody can fill in a few pieces of information and download a bundle that gets them started with our plugin architecture. We have a number of enablement workshops to help our partners for the development of that. And then there's a plugin exchange, which for us is shared.morpheusdata.com, of existing plugins that we have built out and developed, as well as will be the place in which our partners are able to post or host plugins in which our customers can consume or leverage.
So you mentioned CMDB. You guys are actually maintaining a CMDB, or are you using some other service?
We're going to tie into CMDB solutions. The most common one that we see is ServiceNow. So we're going to, as part of deployment of workloads and discovery, tap into that to update the CMDB. So I talked about extensibility from a cloud standpoint. Certainly mentioned the Broadcom acquisition of VMware. Having options. Morpheus platform includes over a dozen cloud integrations out of the box, but we certainly do see more and more options coming up again and again and again. This provides us the ability to be able to tap into those new clouds as they come up without having to do a lot of heavy lifting from a native integration standpoint. That allows us to work with third-party development teams, services partners, as well as technology alliance partners to develop these new integrations from a plugin standpoint to tap into those new clouds as they come online. And then finally, taking a quick look at what that plugin integration looks like from a more technical standpoint. So it provides a really great model in which we can leverage Morpheus constructs of I want to sync in a host or hypervisor, a network, VM, perform various operations. Really, it's making calls into those APIs that are exposed by the underlying hypervisors or cloud technologies to be able to extend the functionality of the Morpheus platform to integrate with those new clouds.